are back with the Money Stop. It's your most important NASCAR betting stop of the day. He's Cole Cusimano. I'm Steven Cusimano. We're presented by Kicking the Tires and our friends at Grid Rival. Cole, coming off race number 1 of the NASCAR playoffs, Joey Logano punches his ticket to round number 2.
Yes, indeed. It was a Penske perfect day at Atlanta Motor Speedway to open up these round of 16 playoffs. And before I go any further, I just want to apologize to our listeners and our followers for having no official episode last week. I was actually at Atlanta Motor Speedway for this playoff opener. Steven has been in the midst of a big playoff push from his Somerset Patriots team, so it was a little bit difficult to get our schedules lined up. But with that said, we did have a pretty solid race at Atlanta, and if you did stay tuned to our social media channels at @the_MoneyStop, then you would have seen that I had a very strong feeling, once again, going into another drafting track about Team Penske, and boy, were they perfect. My pick was Ryan Blaney for the win, but I also had a really strong gut feeling about Austin Cindric. And what do you know? Cindric led the most laps. They both won a stage each, but it was Joey Logano who got it done, won yet another drafting race, and locks himself into the round of 12. But outside of that, some big players, but some big points hits on the day. Kyle Larson wrecked hard in stage 1 after a malfunction in the right front of his car. Denny Hamlin had a really puzzling weekend with a bad qualifying effort, followed up by a really poor performance in the race. And you also had some guys like Chase Briscoe get caught up in some incidents as well. So it was a very, hectic day from a playoff sense. But I guess measuring up this Atlanta race to the prior ones since the reconfiguration in 2022, it was the tamest of those races. But with that said, I feel like being there in person, first off, let me just tell you, I got to stand on the photo tower and take some photos for the first time in between turns 3 and 4. And man, what a rush. That was such a cool experience seeing those cars fly past you on this 1.5-mile track. And yeah, I know the first 2 stages were pretty tame, but coming down to the last 25 laps, I was literally on the edge of my seat in the media center. It was incredible. And everything you want to finish as well, coming down to it, that battle between the Team Penske teammates and the Trackhouse Racing teammates, it was a fun one. It really was. Looking ahead now to Watkins Glen, our home track in upstate New York. Cannot wait to get out to this one. Got some different variables at play that should make it a very interesting and potentially another chaotic wild card race for this round of 16. And looking forward to it.
Yes, up in the Empire State, and this has been a Hendrick Motorsports playground the last few years, Cole. Let's take it to the bank here. Look at some pre-qualifying odds per bet MGM. No surprises. Couple Hendrick Chevys up top. You've got Kyle Larson at plus 600, William Byron plus 725, SVG plus 750. You got Tyler Reddick plus 825, and then Chase Elliott rounds out the top 5 at plus 900. So let's kick off these sleepers, Cole, and talk about some of the guys that, or at least the favorites. Kick off this favorites category with some of the guys that are favored to win this race.
Yes, let's jump right into it. Steven, you alluded to it right there. HMS has been downright unstoppable at the Glen, winning the last 5 races there. That is 5 years in a row they have made a trip to victory lane. The most recent being won by William Byron, who is plus 725 for the race win. That is the second shortest odds behind his teammate Kyle Larson. And Willie B is an interesting one because we documented it well, how he got those 3 wins early in the season. They looked like the team to beat, and then they kind of just trailed off. And now I think you're seeing at a point in the season where this team is finally rounding into championship form, and maybe you could chalk it up to testing for the playoffs in the future, but I think you're seeing the William Byron that we saw earlier in the season kind of come to fruition now with Rudy Fugle atop the pit box. To the eye test, Willie B might be flying a bit under the radar at this point, but if you look at the stats, it definitely points to this team making an upward trend. Case in point, he was top 5 for a majority of that race last week at Atlanta, came home with a 9th place finish, but over the last 4 races, he's led laps in each of those 4 starts with a runner-up included in there as well. And don't forget, Byron has been one of the better cars on road courses in this next-gen era. Case in point, just mentioned the win last year at the Glen. Dominated that race for all intents and purposes, led the most laps. And in his career at the Glen, he has top 10s in 3 of 5 starts, with the 2 outliers being a 21st and 22nd place finish. Not reading too much into that. What I am reading into is the fact that HMS has won the last 5 races at the Glen, and William Byron is definitely on the upward trend here. So I think of that 4-car stable, Willie B is going to be the safest option. We've seen the volatility with Kyle Larson. I think Chase Elliott's been a very consistent play this year. But as far as a race-winning play, I think William Byron is your best bet in this favorites tier. And then for my second favorite, I'm going to go with the man from down under, SVG, Shane Van Gisbergen, plus 750 for the race win, the third shortest odds behind Kyle Larson and William Byron. And why am I picking SVG? I mean, the answer is pretty obvious here. He is a road course ace. He's proven that he can win at this level in the Cup Series with that Chicago street course win last year. And look, I know this year things have not gone his way at the top level. He finished 20th at Sonoma, had that DNF early on in the Chicago race. And this is also going to be his first start at Watkins Glen. But what I am taking a lot of stock into is the fact that Goodyear is bringing a brand new tire to this track, and it's supposed to have a lot of fall-off associated with it. They're saying about 3 to 4 seconds at that. So I'm thinking this is going to level the playing field quite a bit. And I know they're going to have a full practice session here come Saturday. However, I think what we've seen from SVG in his young NASCAR career, whether it be Cup or Xfinity, is his innate ability to adapt to these ever-changing variables. And just having that raw talent and the skill sets to navigate these winding tracks, I think it's going to play right into his hand. Keep in mind, he's also getting some extra track time in the Xfinity Series this weekend, and he's a 3-time road course winner in that series on top of his win at the Chicago Street Course in the Cup Series. So I know he hasn't had as much experience as a lot of the guys in this field at Watkins Glen. It'll be his first start, or I guess you could say second, once he has that Xfinity one under his belt. But I think that when you factor in the variables of the new tires and the track limiters, no one's going to be better at finding the speed at this track than SVG.
There's definitely a reason those two guys are favorites. I want to move to another couple of guys that pretty much round out that top five. I'll start with Tyler Reddick because Reddick coming off a really quiet sixth-place finish at Atlanta. He's got top 10s in back-to-back races and plus 33 to the good. So you can argue he's right around that mark of he's wanting to do some points racing, but also can definitely go out a little bit extra for the win this week. And looking at a guy that has finished 8th or better on every road course this year. He had a 5th-place finish at COTA, runner-up at Chicago, a race that, remember, he was literally one bad turn away from winning, and then he finished 8th with the most laps led at Sonoma. So you can make the argument that Tyler Reddick at plus 825 is the best driver at road courses this season. And looking at his top 10s or at least his 3 starts at Watkins Glen, they've all been top 10s. He finished 8th here last year, 7th here the year before that. So looking at it for this year, you're looking at a guy that has had top 10s at Watkins Glen. He's had top 10s at every road course race this year, so there's a very good reason as to why he's one of the top 5 in odds. And as you mentioned, taking a lot of stock into that tire test, he was one of the 3 that also competed in it with Joey Logano and Daniel Suarez. So very good reason why Tyler Reddick should be a driver that will be a force to be reckoned with this week, as well as the Vegas odds-on favorite per BetMGM, and that would be Kyle Larson, plus 600. After a really brutal result at Atlanta, he is only 15 points to the good after being the championship favorite. But look at his results this year. 1 at Sonoma. He's a 2-time winner at Watkins Glen, including a couple years ago, 2022. He's finished 8th or better in 4 of his last 5 starts at this track. One outlier, which was last year. You can't really read too much into that, but you're looking at, once again, the best of both worlds from Kyle Larson. He's been one of the road course ringers in the next-gen era, and especially at Watkins Glen, and even this year, winning at Sonoma. So you're looking at 2 guys that I think are extremely high floor, high ceiling picks this week to go along with the 2 that you mentioned. And I kind of like our sleepers a lot this week too, Cole.
Oh yeah, listen up and listen good. We've got 4 drivers here that are some serious sleepers for this win. And the one I'm about to mention right now, you would not expect to hear him in this category as a sleeper at Watkins Glen, seeing as it's the site of his first win, and it's arguably his best track on the circuit. But you'll understand why in a second. I'm going to go with Chase Elliott, who is actually plus 900 for the race win. That is the 5th shortest odds in that aspect. And the reason I'm calling Chase Elliott a sleeper at a track that he's won at twice in his career is because he is still winless in the next gen on a road course, even though he is a 7-time winner on these style tracks. And on top of that, while he does have 1 win this year, it came all the way back in April at Texas. And not to mention, he only has 1 quality finish on a road course this year. That was a 4th place effort at Sonoma. So I do want to touch on one thing really quick. He did have a really quietly good day at his home track at Atlanta to open the playoffs. It was a top 10 finish. And I mean, this is what we come to expect from Chase Elliott this year. He's been one of the most consistent drivers the entire season. He's going to be good for a top 10 almost every single weekend, but you cannot really count on him to be a race-winning play. And I think if there's ever going to be a weekend where we can see him round back into form on these style tracks and just in general as the season's winding down, it's going to be at a place like Watkins Glen where he's won at twice before. And on top of that, he also had a 4-race top 4 streak going into last year's race where he ran out of gas late in the running while he was up front. So I'm not reading too much into that, outlier finish last year. He could very well have 5 straight top 5 finishes. But looking at his career as a whole at the Glen, he has 170 laps led. That is the second most in the series at his young age of 28 years old, and a 9.4 average finish in his starts here. So I think right there is what I want to hit on, that 9.4 average. That's what I'm looking for out of Chase Elliott this weekend, is another solid top 10 day. But given his road course pedigree and his history at this track, he is a legitimate sleeper for this win, especially taking into account that HMS has won the last 5 races here. So I do love Chase Elliott quite a bit, obviously, whenever we go to Watkins Glen. But another driver I'm extremely high on this weekend is going to be from the Gibbs camp. And I think that this is the stable that can potentially play upset to that Hendrick stable this weekend at Watkins Glen. And I'm going to kick it off with the namesake of this organization in Ty Gibbs, who is plus 1,400 for the race win. And he's walking away from Atlanta with a misleading 17th place finish after leading 37 laps late in the running with a legitimate shot at the win. However, do not read too much into the results because he has been really, really good over his last 4 starts with 2 top 5s in that span. And I think looking at Watkins Glen going into this race for this team in the second race of the round of 16, this sets Ty Gibbs and that 54 team up perfectly because they have been some of the best on-road courses in 2024. Case in point, going into the weekends, he's started top 10 in all 3 road course races this year, including 2 front row starts. And he also was able to execute on race day, finishing 3rd place both at COTA and Chicago. And I think one thing we've seen time and time again, whether it be Cup or Xfinity, is that Ty Gibbs is able to adapt to any adverse situations. He's been one of the best drivers on these style tracks in both series. I mean, those pair of 3rd place finishes speak for themselves, but look at last year at Watkins Glen. He finished 5th in his rookie season. So I think with a full year of racing under his belt, he's getting some extra track time this weekend in the Xfinity Series as well. I think it's a no-brainer to have Ty Gibbs in your lineup and fired up for prop bets and even potentially a race winner bet. I really feel like this could be the weekend where Ty Gibbs breaks through for his first ever career Cup Series win, truthfully.
I'm with you. I think Joe Gibbs Racing is going to be the second team to watch here, and I like Christopher Bell a lot, plus 1,100 for the win this week. He's got a 3-race top 4 streak, which I feel like is going a little bit unnoticed, but we've said it a couple times the last few weeks. It's a driver and team that knows how to peak at the right time, and that's exactly what they're doing right now. He has the second most points of any driver that is not locked in. He is plus 40 to the good, so very similar in the sense of where Tyler Reddick is in the standings and all the reasoning I mentioned that they can definitely go for a win this week. And look at him at the road courses this year. Top 10s at COTA and Sonoma. He did have a late incident at Chicago after he was leading late in that race, and he was one of the guys that had a shot at the win in a race that was pretty much a battle of attrition, so you can almost wipe it out as far as the results go. But top 10s at the other 2. He's also had top 10s in all 3 starts at Watkins Glen, including 3rd place last year. So he's got the recency. This year, he's got the recency at Watkins Glen, and he's got a really strong resume at the road courses this season alone. So Christopher Bell, as good a pick as any to dethrone this streak of wins by Hendrick Motorsports that dates back to 2020. And we've already talked about one road course ringer, a guy whose name you're only going to see at a track like this in SVG, but another one is A.J. Allmendinger, and why not? He's plus 1,300 for the win. He's finished 6th at both COTA and Sonoma this year, a former winner at Watkins Glen from way back in 2014. He's had top 10s in 2/3 of his starts here at this track. That's 8 out of 12 starts, an average finish of 8.8, which is among some of the best in the sport with a very large sample size. And he's had top 5s in both of his next-gen starts here, including 4th with laps led last year, runner-up the year prior, and he is also racing in the Xfinity Series. So you think about a guy that's had a ton of laps logged at this track. They've pretty much all been successful. He's proven he can race well at the next gen at these road course tracks. And I think that A.J. Allmendinger is going to be a very strong sleeper for this race. Definitely a top 5, I would think. Seems like a really strong prop bet. But again, a guy that's proven he can sneak up there and get a win from time to time as well. So it wouldn't absolutely shock me, but that's a sleepers category call I feel pretty good about.
I could not agree more. I would go as far as saying I feel more confident in these sleepers contending for the race win as opposed to our favorites to, at some capacity, just given some uncertainty and inconsistencies on those fronts for those 4 drivers we mentioned previously. So, sleepers category consisting of Chase Elliott, Ty Gibbs, AJ Allmendinger, and Christopher Bell, legitimate heavy sleepers for this win at the Go Bowling at the Glen coming up on Sunday.
Let's talk some value picks here, Cole, because we don't have many DFS values up right now. We'll get to those on social media later this week with Grid Rival and seeing some of the contests that they have open, but some value picks based on where Vegas has them kind of ranked right now based on the odds and also just where they may open up in terms of DFS budgeting. I'll start off here. I think Zane Smith is a really strong value this week. He's had top 20s on all 3 road courses this year with a top of 16th. So you're looking at a guy that, again, you're not looking for Zane Smith to go out there and win the race, but at cost, at value, Zane Smith is one of the best you could have. He's a 2-time road course winner in the Truck Series. He doesn't have any starts at Watkins Glen, which is the cause for concern, obviously, but that's why he's a value pick. He's going to be a guy that is not getting a lot of recognition by the odds makers, but just looking at the rest of his career on the road courses and even this year in the next gen, I think that there's reason to believe he could be somebody that finishes in the top 20 again. In the same vein, you can look at a guy with a little more experience. That's Justin Haley, another one of my favorite value picks this week. He's been right around a top 20 car on the road courses in the next-gen era with top 15 upside. He's had 14 starts at the road courses, an average finish of 20.2. He's also had 2 top 5s, including the second-place finish at Chicago. Best finish at Watkins Glen, though, 18th, and that was in the next-gen car. So those are 2 guys that I think are going a little bit overlooked by the odds makers, but they both have they have a pretty solid chance at the top 20, and I would say an outside chance of sneaking into the top 10 if this is a race that proves to be really competitive and levels the playing field with that new tire. So I think those are 2 drivers that are very strong additions to the value picks this week.
I could not agree more. I think what you're looking for in this category is top 20 plays with top 15 upside and more. And I think that's exactly what Zane Smith and Justin Haley bring to the table with those stats in mind. The one guy I'm going to go with here that has a legitimate top 10 threat is going to be the Todd father, Todd Gilliland. We got to talk about the Todd father going into upstate New York. So he's somebody who's always been very good on road courses throughout his entire career, whether it be trucks or the Cup Series. He has top 10s actually at both Sonoma and Chicago this year, and 4 of his 10 career top 10s have come on those style tracks, including his career best finish of 4th at the Indy Road Course a couple years ago. And also keep in mind, he finished 11th in this race last year. So Todd Gilliland, someone who's had speed the last few weeks with a front row start at Daytona, 3rd place start at Atlanta last week, laps led in both those races. I think if there's ever going to be a place where Todd Gilliland is almost a sure thing for a top 10 or a legitimate threat for a top 10, it's going to be a road course. And seeing as he almost got that last year, I like his chances of doing that this weekend. Great value pick. And then finally, we're going to have some fun with this last value pick. Coming out of nowhere, seemingly, Juan Pablo Montoya is finally making his return to the NASCAR Cup Series, piloting the number 50 for 2311 Racing. And I think for that reason, we can expect JPM to have a pretty solid day. He won at the Glen 14 years ago. His last race in the Cup Series, however, was in 2014, and he's now 48 years old. So there are some obviously causes for concern with his age and him making his Cup debut in the next-gen car. But I do think that him having the experience that he has at this track, being in top-tier equipment like 2311 Racing, and I think also, again, having that level playing field and a lot of those same feelings I had about SVG and why he could be a legitimate contender for the win, that's why I think JPM could be due for a really solid run. I don't think he's going to have a top 10 car with race-winning speed. It's very possible, I guess, given his history and pedigree. But I'm looking at more of JPM as a top 20 play with top 15 upside potentially. But it will definitely be an uphill battle for sure. But definitely a fun name to consider when building your DFS lineups.
Right, and he's got equipment that has proven they could win races and contend for strong finishes. So that definitely plays into his favor too. And he's going to be a guy that I'm heavily monitoring during practice and qualifying. So as that rounds out our 12 drivers, 4 from each tier, let's get this down to 6, Cole. Each pick 1 per tier. I'm going to go with, out of the favorites category, I'll take Kyle Larson. I'll take Christopher Bell as my favorite sleeper. And I'll go with Zane Smith as my value pick of the week.
Awesome. From the favorites category, I'm going to go with SVG. From the sleepers, I'm going to go with Ty Gibbs, and then for my value pick, I'm going to go with Todd Gilliland. So triple G's for me in my 3 drivers this weekend.
Well, let's look at some big money bets here, Cole. These are our favorite prop bets of the week. There are a few that stuck out. I would say that as far as top fives go, I'm a little surprised that William Byron is even money for a top 5, at least on DraftKings. He's plus 105, so if you can get that value, I love it. Same deal with Tyler Reddick, plus 100. I think those are 2 of our favorites that you can get double your money if they finish in the top 5, which is a really strong value to me. And you can also get Ty Gibbs at plus 180 to finish in the top 5 with the speed he's had recently. And another one I liked as well, I don't know if I'll call it a big money bet, but a very solid prop bet value. What about Todd Gilliland at plus 360 to be in the top 10 after he finished 11th here last year and has had really sporty stuff over the past couple of weeks? Those are the first 4 that come to my mind, but I'm curious where your attention gets grabbed, Cole.
First, I did want to say that I did not include the Gilliland top 10 prop only because, these are big money bets, and I don't know if I'm comfortable throwing big money on that, but I do feel good about throwing a couple bucks on that Todd Gilliland top 10, so love that call. One driver we did not mention, who I like for a top 10 prop actually, is Ross Chastain at plus 125. Ross Chastain had a really good shot at that win in Atlanta last weekend. He's had, I think, the most speed he's had the entire season the last 3 or 4 weeks, and he's somebody who's proven to be a really reliable driver on road courses. He's finished 7th and 5th on them this year. So that's, I think, in my eyes, a really good bet for a top 10 prop. And for top 5s, I'm looking at the 2 Gibbs Toyotas of Christopher Bell at plus 140 and Ty Gibbs at plus 190. Again, I feel really strongly about the Gibbs stable this weekend, specifically those 2 drivers and Ty Gibbs and Christopher Bell. And for that reason, I think that they're both great top 5 prop picks, seeing as Ty Gibbs has a pair of third-place finishes on these style tracks already this year. He could easily have a win or 2 on those tracks as well. And then C. Bell and his stats at this track throughout his Cup career have been really, really good. So I like those 3 as my big money bets. Ty Gibbs, Christopher Bell top 5, Ross Chastain top 10.
Yeah, those are great. Let's talk also some over-unders with our friends at Grid Rival. This is a really intuitive way to look at betting on races because you could parlay these too. And it's basically better or worse than something like 8.5 or 9.5 as opposed to over-under. But really easy way to potentially make money if you can combine some of these together. So, Cole, what were your favorite better or worse bets of the week on Grid Rival?
I got a few, so I'm going to go with the 2 guys I just mentioned that I was very high on, Christopher Bell and Ty Gibbs. Bell better than 8.5 and Gibbs better than 9.5. Then I also mentioned Ross Chastain as another sleeper for a big money bet top 10 prop. I have him at over 12.5 to finish. And then I also am a big fan of Tyler Reddick this weekend, but a slim margin for error here as he is 6.5 for his positional prop. So I went over 6.5 for Tyler Reddick. And with those 4 drivers in mind, Bell, Gibbs, Chastain, and Reddick, if you throw $10 on that and go full throttle so you cannot miss any legs of that parlay, you're walking away with $100. If you use the safety car insurance feature, all of your props hidden gets you $50, and only missing 1 leg for 3 of 4, you get $15, so $5 more than what you put in there. I feel pretty strongly about those. Do you have any thoughts on that, Steven?
Yeah, I like that quite a bit, especially, looking at a few of our favorites there with Seabell and Ty Gibbs, and then like you mentioned, Ross Chastain, a guy that wants to have a strong finish to the season. Tyler Reddick, we mentioned a lot too. I love the idea of that. And my favorite way to go about this, honestly, is to do one, all 4, and then do a separate one with the safety car, just in case, something out of their control might take them out of the race. But I'm a big fan of all 4 of those bets in terms of the better or worse this week. And big fan of that. But let's talk about the head-to-head parlays too, Cole, because that's another really easy way to make money. If you can look at some of the matchups that they have based on the different websites and where certain drivers clock in, I think that there's definitely some money to be made there as well. So what are your favorite head-to-head bets of the week?
All right, so I'm a big fan of the ones I've picked out here. And again, I am a big fan of Grid Rival and how they have pretty much every single driver you could think of, every matchup you could think of available, because there's so many ways you can go about this. But I honed in on 3 matchups that I'm really high on. The first one is going to be Austin Cindric over Alex Bowman, and he has a 1.5 positional buffer in between that he can finish in between. I like this one a lot because, first off, Watkins Glen has been one of Alex Bowman's worst tracks in his Cup career. He's been very vocal about that. Spoke to him post-race at Atlanta, and he also had those same opinions. But I know they've been working on their program a lot, so definitely could be changing of the script there, and knowing HMS's dominance, you never know. But I like Austin Cindric a lot. I know we didn't mention him specifically on this show, but he's somebody who is always a top 10 threat on the road courses. And again, he did the tire test here a month ago, so I'm factoring that into account heavily. And I think that's a no-brainer to have Austin Cindric ahead of Alex Bowman with that 1.5 positional buffer. The other one that I'm a massive fan of here is Chase Elliott over Denny Hamlin, and he has to finish ahead of him by 4.5 positions, so basically 5 spots over Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin, again, he has been on the worst stretch of this season, I would say. He has failed to finish races. He has failed to rack up a lot of points at all. And as a result, he is near the bottom of the playoff standings right now. In some serious trouble going into a place where, truthfully, I don't feel very confident in him and his abilities. Just them and their road course program have been the one frontier they have yet to conquer, I feel like, in the next-gen car. So, and as we know, Chase Elliott's pedigree on these tracks, his history at this track specifically, it's, again, a no-brainer to have Elliott over Hamlin, even by 5 positions. And then finally, I chose Ross Chastain by 2.5 positions over Ryan Blaney. Again, just mentioned Ross Chastain's stats on the road courses this season: 7th place, 5th place, so a top 10, a top 5. And Ryan Blaney is someone who has also been vocal about his struggles at Watkins Glen and on the road courses in general. I feel like this is the one style of track where Ryan Blaney has yet to really post some quality results. And for that, again, I do like Chastain over Ryan Blaney. So for this one, given my confidence in those 3 parlayable matchups, I did a $20 proposal, full throttle. If you get all 3 of those correct, it's a $120 payout. If you use the safety car feature and you get all 3 of those correct, that is, you're doubling your money at $40, and missing 1 leg, you're getting your money back at $20. So again, really, really high on these head-to-head matchups this weekend.
Yeah, very simply, I love that. I mean, all 3 of those, I think it's best to just keep it simple. You know, you don't want to get too confused or wrapped up in all the different possible matchups, but those are 3 I feel extremely strongly about. And again, same deal. If you want to lock in all 3 and then 1 with the safety car additionally, I think that's a very strong and safe, smart way to go about betting those 3. And like you said, great reasoning on all 3 of those, especially can't stress enough that, people are going to get lost in the name Denny Hamlin, but again, just not a strong run recently. And hearing your insight about what you heard specifically from Alex Bowman about the fact that his confidence is not necessarily the highest at Watkins Glen should speak volumes about some of those head-to-heads. So I feel very strongly about those, Cole. Let's put our money where our mouth is, and let's discuss, Cole, our race winner and sleeper picks. Last week, we had a decently strong showing. You had picked Ryan Blaney for the win, and obviously he came really close in spite of running into some trouble in Stage 3. He really almost won the thing. I chose William Byron. Obviously, we didn't have a full episode to discuss all of those picks, but you also had your favorite sleeper as Austin Cindric, and he was really close to winning as well last week at Atlanta. So we've been on a heater recently with the race winner pick, so let's take it to the bank. And, you went first last week, so I'll take first pick this week, and for my winner, I'm going to go with Chase Elliott. I just got a strong gut feeling. I know that we had him as kind of the 5th out of the top 5 in odds this week, but you just go to Watkins Glen. He's one of the first guys I think of. I think that, again, you get to this time of year, there's just certain drivers and certain teams, the 9 and Alan Gustafson and Chase Elliott included, that just know how to turn it on at this time of year. And I think every time we go to a road course, especially one that is now in the playoffs, I think they see it as an opportunity to make something happen compared to some of the other tracks that are on the circuit. And I just think it feels like it's time to see that 9 car back in victory lane. So a little more of a gut than some of the reasoning you could have gone with a few of the other guys. But I'm going to go with Chase Elliott this week because that's what my gut's telling me.
And we always preach to go with your gut. It would be no surprise to me at all if Chase Elliott won this race. It's going to be a big moment for this team. I see the vision as well. I mean, he has yet to win on these style tracks in the next-gen car after being so dominant in the previous generation. So I could definitely see Chase Elliott winning at this track once again with his pedigree and his history at the Glen. For me, I'm going to go with my sleeper first. I'm going to actually go with Ross Chastain. I know we didn't highlight him specifically, but I've been harping his praises the last couple minutes in regards to some prop bets for top 10 finishes and the head-to-head matchups. So I do think Ross Chastain's going to have a really strong race, continue his speed into upstate New York. For my winner, I think you can kind of see where my head's at. I know HMS is the easy play. It's the safe play. They very well could win, and they probably should, being as they won the last 5 starts there. But I feel really strongly about Ty Gibbs and that Gibbs stable this weekend, specifically him and Christopher Bell. I really like what I've seen from this driver in recent weeks. I mentioned those 2 top 5 finishes. He had a shot at the win last week at Atlanta. And just how this kid has done on the road courses in his entire career in Xfinity and Cup has been really impressive. Those pair of third-place finishes is no joke. He finished, again, top 5 here last year. I expect him to only be better coming into this race and with the extra seat time in the Xfinity Series. And I do think that it's going to be his first win in the Cup Series here at Watkins Glen.
Wouldn't surprise me at all. And I think that you convinced me on Todd Gilliland before. I'm going to use him as my sleeper. I just looking at those numbers at the road courses this year and honestly forgot that he finished 11th at Watkins Glen before we started this discussion. So I'll take Todd Gilliland as my sleeper. You definitely convinced me. But this is a fun one, Cole. Watkins Glen has always been, I would say, probably my favorite road course. I could pretty confidently say that. But this will be the Go Bowling at the Glen on Sunday, 3:05 p.m. It's going to be a really fun race, quite simply put. It's going to be fun to see this as an added wrinkle in the playoffs, and there's a lot of storylines entering the race that I'm excited to see, and I'm not sure what you think, Cole, but this is it seems like a really great addition to the playoff circuit to me.
Oh, 1,000%. And it makes me so happy to see New York there making its playoff debut at Watkins Glen. Just a great facility. I think it's my favorite road course as well. Just the high speeds that they do there. I think adding this new tire is going to make a new element of compelling racing to this track. I think you're going to see more passing. You're going to see more strategies at play. And I think you're going to see more of like an old school race. These road course races in the next gen car have not been the most enjoyable to watch. So I think with all these different variables in mind, the ringers in there as well with SVG, Allmendinger, JPM, it's going to be a really, really fun one to watch. And I think it's going to be a lot less predictable than years past at road courses and the Glen specifically. So cannot wait to get this one underway on Sunday.
Yeah, this will be a fun one. Once again, it's the Go Bowling at the Glen 2024, this upcoming Sunday, 3:05 Eastern Time. Really exciting race at Watkins Glen. Number 2 of the playoffs. Hopefully you can tail us, add some wealth to your wallet, and also follow along on social media at _MoneyStop, because once again, a lot of things that we haven't discussed yet, including daily fantasy budgets and lineups based on the fact that the contests are not out yet, but they will be by the time you're listening to this. So keep it tuned at the _MoneyStop. We'll drop the jack on the most important stop of the day. He's Cole. I'm Steven, and we'll see you guys next week.